There is a song that children have been singing for longer than anyone can remember. You've heard it. Perhaps you sang it yourself, in a schoolyard or a park, holding hands in a circle while someone stood in the middle. The melody is simple, the words repeat, and when the bridge falls down, everyone collapses to the ground, laughing. London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. It feels innocent. It feels like play. For generations, this rhyme has been passed from child to child, taught by older siblings and playground tradition, never written in textbooks, never explained by adults. It simply exists, the way games and songs always have, appearing wherever children gather. The version most of us know goes like this. London Bridge is falling down, and someone must rebuild it. First with wood and clay, but those won't hold. Then with bricks and mortar, but even those crumble. Iron and steel are tried next, but they bend and break. Each verse follows the same pattern. Build it up, watch it fall, build it up again. The song cycles through materials, through failures, through attempts to make something last. And at the center of the circle, there is always the same question. How will we build it up? The game itself is just as familiar. Children join hands and form a ring, moving in a slow circle while they sing. One or two players stand in the middle, representing the bridge. When the song reaches falling down, the circle collapses inward and the bridge falls. Then everyone gets up, reforms the circle, and starts again. It's repetitive, almost hypnotic. No one wins, no one loses. The game simply continues until someone gets tired or the bell rings. For most people, this is all the rhyme has ever been, a harmless childhood memory, a bit of musical nostalgia from a simpler time. It evokes playground dust and scraped knees, the feeling of holding a friend's hand while singing something you didn't fully understand but somehow knew by heart. There's comfort in that, a sense of continuity. The same song, sung the same way, across decades. But if you ask when this rhyme began, the answer becomes less clear. The earliest known written record of London Bridge is falling down appears in the mid-17th century, tucked into a collection of songs and games. By then, it was already being described as old, a tune everyone knew, passed down through oral tradition. The words had likely changed over time, smoothed and simplified as they moved from one generation to the next. But the structure remained, and yet, references exist that suggest the song is far older than that first written record. There are mentions in medieval manuscripts of bridge-related songs and games. There are fragments of verse that share the same rhythm, the same repeated phrases. Some historians believe the rhyme may have roots stretching back centuries before it was ever written down, preserved not in books but in memory, in the voices of children who sang it without knowing where it came from, which raises a question that doesn't have an easy answer. Why would a song about a bridge collapsing be turned into a children's game? Most nursery rhymes have origins that are either practical or playful, counting songs, lullabies, riddles meant to teach or entertain. But this one is different. It's not a lullaby. It's not teaching a lesson. It's describing something breaking, over and over, with no resolution. A structure that falls, a problem that can't be solved. And children have been singing it for hundreds of years. There's something strange in that. Not dangerous, not frightening, just strange. A song about failure and collapse, sung cheerfully. A game about something falling apart, played over and over without question. Most people never think about it, but once you start to notice, it's hard to ignore. The rhyme first appeared in written records in the 17th century, but the references to older traditions suggest it had been sung long before that. And if it was old even then, where did it come from? What were children repeating, generation after generation, without ever knowing why? The bridge falls down, the circle collapses, and then, without hesitation, they get up and start again, as if something in the song demanded to be remembered. If you travel north from London, across the cold waters that separate England from Scandinavia, you will find children singing a different song. The melody is not quite the same, the words are in another language, but the story they tell is familiar. A bridge is falling, someone must rebuild it, and something, always, is required to make it stand. The English rhyme about London Bridge is not alone. Across medieval Europe, in regions that had little contact with one another, similar songs appeared. In Denmark, there was a ballad about a bridge at Rebay that would not stay standing. In Germany, children sang about a bridge that collapsed each time it was built. In parts of Italy, old folk songs described stone arches that fell into rivers, no matter how carefully they were constructed. The names of the places changed, the languages shifted, but the pattern remained. A bridge falls. It must be rebuilt, and something must be given to make it last. Folklorists began noticing these parallels in the 19th century, when scholars started collecting rural songs and traditions before they disappeared. What they found was striking. These were not variations of the same song, borrowed from one culture to another. They appeared to have developed independently, in isolated communities, separated by mountains and seas, and yet the structure was nearly identical. Some researchers classified them under a single category, bridge collapse songs. Others called them foundation songs. But whatever name was used, the pattern was undeniable. Across Europe, people had been singing about bridges that would not stand. In Scandinavia, the songs were often darker. The ballads spoke of builders who struggled for years to construct a bridge, only to watch it fall each night. In some versions, a voice from the water would warn them. The bridge required a toll. Not money, not labor, something else. These songs were old when they were first written down, passed from generation to generation in fishing villages and farming towns, sung during long winter nights. In Germany, the rhyme took the form of a children's game, much like the English version. But the verses were more specific. They named materials wood, stone, iron, and explained why each one failed. The wood rotted, the stone cracked, the iron rusted. And in some versions, there was a final verse that suggested what would hold something alive. In parts of France and Italy, similar motifs appeared in regional legends, not always as songs, but as stories told about real bridges. There were accounts of structures that collapsed repeatedly during construction, no matter what the engineers tried. And in these stories, there was often a solution, a remedy that involved ritual, offering, or sacrifice. These were not myths. They were recorded as local history, written in town chronicles and church records. What all of these traditions shared was a belief that a bridge was not merely a structure. It was a crossing, a threshold, a place where two worlds met, land and water, safety and danger, the known and the unknown. And thresholds, in older belief systems, were places that demanded respect. They required protection. They needed to be sanctified. This was not superstition in the way we use the word today. For the people who built these bridges, the idea that a structure required spiritual protection was as practical as calculating weight and balance. A bridge stood between life and death. It carried travelers over rivers that could drown them, ravines that could swallow them. If it failed, people died. And so it made sense, coherent, emotionally real sense that something beyond mortar and stone was necessary. The songs reflected that belief. In many versions, the lyrics ask the same question: what will make the bridge stand? And the answers cycle through materials that fail, one after another, until something different is suggested. In the English rhyme, the answer is never clear. The song simply loops. But in the older European versions, the final verses sometimes offer a solution, and that solution is almost never a building material. Some folklorists believe these songs preserve a memory of foundation rituals, ceremonies performed when bridges, walls, and buildings were constructed. Historical records confirm that such rituals existed. In medieval Europe, it was common practice to bless a new structure, to bury objects beneath its foundation, to mark it with symbols of protection. These were not secret practices. They were public, communal acts, but there are also records that suggest the rituals were sometimes darker. In the 19th century, when anthropologists began studying rural customs, they found accounts of foundation sacrifices, practices where living creatures were interred in or beneath structures to ensure stability. In some regions, animals were used. In others, there were stories disputed, fragmentary, difficult to verify of human offerings. These accounts were often dismissed as folklore, but the songs remained, and the songs remembered. What survives in London Bridge is falling down may be an echo of that older tradition. The structure falls, the materials fail, and the question lingers: what will make it stand? The English version does not answer, it simply repeats. But the fact that the question is asked at all suggests it once had an answer that was later forgotten. The song did not begin in England. It did not belong to one place or one people. It appeared across Europe, in different forms, carrying the same idea. A bridge is not just built, it is consecrated, it is protected, it requires something, and children, for centuries, have been singing that memory without knowing what it meant. Imagine standing at the edge of a river in the year 1200. The water is dark and fast. On the other side is a village, a trade route, a path that could save days of travel. But between you and that destination is nothing but current and depth. To cross, someone must build a bridge. And to build a bridge, someone must step into the water and place the first stone. In that moment, you are not just an engineer. You are crossing into a space that does not belong to you. For people in medieval Europe, and long before, rivers were not simply obstacles, they were boundaries. They separated the living world from something else, something older, something that demanded respect. Springs were said to be inhabited by spirits. Lakes held gods. Rivers carried the dead to the afterlife in stories that stretched back to ancient Greece and Rome. Water was a threshold, and thresholds were dangerous. To build a bridge across such a place was an act of intrusion. It was not enough to lay stones and timber. The structure had to be protected, it had to be blessed, and in many cultures, blessing alone was not sufficient. The bridge required something more. This is where the song begins to take shape. Medieval records describe ceremonies performed at the start of major construction projects. Before a bridge was built, there were rituals. Priests would bless the ground. Symbols would be carved into foundation stones. Objects, coins, tools, religious relics would be buried beneath the structure to ensure its stability. These were not optional traditions. They were considered as necessary as mortar. The belief was simple. A bridge spanned two worlds, and something had to hold it in place. Not just physically, but spiritually. Some folklorists believe the song "London Bridge is Falling Down" may preserve a memory of these rituals. The lyrics ask what will make the bridge stand: wood, stone, iron, and each material fails. The question is repeated over and over, as if searching for the right answer. And in some of the older European versions, the answer is not a material at all, it is a life. The practice is called foundation sacrifice, and it appears in cultures across the world. The concept is consistent. When a structure must endure, something living is offered to ensure its permanence. In many cases, this meant animals. Livestock were slaughtered, and their remains placed beneath the cornerstone of a building, a bridge, a city wall. This was documented. It was recorded in account books, mentioned in church records, referenced in legal disputes. But there are also accounts fragmentary, debated, difficult to verify, that suggest the practice was sometimes darker. In the Balkans, there are legends about bridges that required human offerings. The most famous is the story of the Rozafa castle in Albania, where a woman was said to have been sealed into the foundation to ensure the walls would stand. Similar tales exist in Romania, in Serbia, in Greece. These stories were dismissed for centuries as myth, but when archaeologists began excavating old structures, they occasionally found human remains in foundation walls, not buried nearby, sealed inside. Most scholars believe these were rare exceptions, not common practice, but the stories persisted, and the songs remembered. In the German version of the bridge song, there is a verse that names what will hold the structure: a watchman, someone who will stand guard day and night, ensuring the bridge does not fall. In some interpretations, this is symbolic, a guardian spirit, a protector, but in others, the meaning is more literal. The watchman is not hired, he is given. The song does not explain what that means, it simply states it. In Scandinavian ballads, the bridge collapses every night until a voice from the water offers a solution. The solution is never spelled out directly, but the implication is clear. Something must remain, something must be left behind. These were not horror stories. They were not told to frighten. They were expressions of a worldview in which structures that crossed thresholds required more than construction, they required consecration. And consecration, in older belief systems, sometimes required a price. For the people who practiced these rituals, the logic was coherent. A bridge carried hundreds, perhaps thousands of people to safety. If it failed, they drowned. The risk was real, the fear was justified, and if offering one life could save many, the mathematics made sense in a world where survival was never guaranteed. We do not live in that world anymore, but the song survived. What London Bridge is Falling Down may have encoded was not a story, but a memory of a practice, a ritual understanding that bridges were more than physical structures. They were sacred boundaries, places where the natural and the supernatural met, and to build them, something had to be given. The English version of the rhyme does not preserve the details. The final verses have been lost or softened. What remains is the structure of the song itself, the question, the failures, the unresolved search for what will hold. But the older versions, the ones sung in isolated villages, in languages that are now barely spoken, sometimes still contain traces of the answer. And that answer was never stone or iron. It was something that could not be replaced, something that would remain, embedded in the foundation, holding the bridge between two worlds. The song did not invent this idea. It remembered it, and for reasons we can only begin to understand, it has never stopped being sung. There is a moment, in every playground, when the song begins. One child starts singing. Others join in. They form a circle, hold hands, and move in rhythm. The melody is familiar. The words are simple, and when the bridge falls down, they collapse together, laughing, before standing up to start again. None of them know where the song came from. None of them wonder why they sing it. It is simply there, the way games and rhymes have always been there, passed from older children to younger ones, learned without instruction, remembered without effort. But what they are singing is older than any of them realize. We began with a playground game, a nursery rhyme about a bridge that keeps falling down. It seemed innocent. It seemed simple. But as we traced it backward, through England, across Europe, into medieval records and ancient practices, the song revealed itself to be something else. Not a story invented to entertain children, but a memory preserved by them. The pattern appeared across cultures that had little contact with one another. In Denmark, Germany, Italy, and France, similar songs existed, rhymes about bridges that would not stand, structures that required something beyond stone and mortar. The lyrics changed, the languages shifted. But the question remained the same. What will make the bridge last? And in the oldest versions, the answer was never a material. It was a life. Foundation sacrifice was not a myth. It was a documented practice. Animals were offered, objects were buried, and in some accounts fragmentary, disputed, but persistent human lives were given to ensure that walls, towers, and bridges would endure. These were not acts of cruelty in the way we understand the term today. They were acts of belief. A bridge spanned a threshold between safety and danger, life and death. To cross such a boundary required more than engineering. It required consecration. The song may have been part of that process. It is possible that London Bridge is Falling Down was once sung during foundation rituals ceremonies, where communities gathered to witness the blessing of a structure, the offering of protection, the acknowledgement that what was being built required spiritual as well as physical stability. The repetition in the lyrics mirrors the repetition of ritual. The question, what will hold, is the central concern of anyone building something meant to last. And then, at some point, the ritual was forgotten, but the song remained. This is what makes the rhyme so strange. Thousands of folk songs disappeared over the centuries. Countless rituals were abandoned, their meanings lost as Christianity spread, as old beliefs were suppressed or simply faded. Yet this particular song survived. It did not survive in church records or scholarly texts. It survived in the mouths of children who did not understand what they were singing. There is something almost haunting in that. The idea that a song can outlive its meaning, that a melody can carry forward long after the people who created it are gone, long after the rituals it accompanied have been forgotten. The words persist, not because they are useful, but because they are memorable. And they are memorable because they repeat. This is how cultural memory works, not through books or monuments, but through repetition, through songs sung so many times that they become automatic, through games played so often that no one questions why. And so the song moved from ritual to play, from something sacred to something trivial, from adults to children. The transformation was gradual. The meaning drained away slowly, replaced by laughter and movement. But the structure remained intact. The bridge falls, it must be rebuilt. And something wood, stone, iron is never enough. What the song reveals is not just a historical practice, but a pattern in human memory. When something is too difficult to speak about directly, it is encoded, it is turned into metaphor, into story, into song, and sometimes those encodings survive longer than the truths they were meant to protect. The fears that shaped London Bridge's falling down were real. Bridges did collapse. People did drown. And in a world without modern engineering, without steel and concrete, the only assurance communities had was belief. Belief that their rituals mattered. Belief that their offerings would be accepted. Belief that the structure would hold because something sacred had been given to hold it. We do not share those beliefs anymore, but the song has not disappeared. It is still being sung. In schoolyards and parks, in dozens of languages, by children who have never heard of foundation sacrifice or threshold rituals, or the idea that bridges once required consecration. They sing it because it is fun, because it has a melody, because their friends are singing it too. And in that act of repetition, something ancient is preserved. Not the meaning, not the ritual, but the shape of it, the structure, the question that once mattered enough to be turned into song. Perhaps that is why the rhyme survived. Not because it was important, but because it was repeatable. Not because it taught a lesson, but because it could be sung without understanding. The song did not need to be explained to be passed down. It only needed to be remembered. And children are very good at remembering. So the next time you hear London Bridge is falling down, listen carefully, not to the words themselves, but to what they might be carrying. Because every song is a vessel, and some vessels hold more than we realize. What children sing today may be the echo of something their ancestors once believed. A memory encoded so deeply that it has become invisible. A truth buried so long ago that it now sounds like play. The bridge falls down, the circle collapses, and the game begins again, as it has for centuries, as it may for centuries more.